Alright, it's July 6th, 2024. I'm in Chesterfield, Missouri, just outside of St. Louis, at the soon-to-be-closing namesake Chesterfield Mall. Although still open to the public at this point, gaining access proved more difficult than it should have been for me, and upon pulling into the parking lot, my first thought was this mall was already closed, and that I drove over 5 hours to get there for nothing. But I'll circle back to that thought in a few. I'll build some suspense for you. Alright, so, this mall originally opened in 1976 and was one of many projects by prolific mall developer Richard Jacobs. This mall comprises 3 levels, and in terms of square footage, it holds the title of the largest mall in the St. Louis metro from what I can find. Currently on the 2nd level, and the 3rd level is already closed to the public as the movie theater up there already closed. Chesterfield Mall is scheduled for closing in a little over a month, the end of August, for demolition, and is set to be replaced with a mixed-use development dubbed Downtown Chesterfield. There's numerous renderings and flyers for that future mixed-use development hanging around the mall as well as outside in the parking areas. Already passed one at the top of the stairs plastered on the old Macy's gate. So as I was walking through here, Chesterfield Mall definitely has an interesting vibe to me. There's portions where renovations and updating are quite evident, but there's also corners where originalness just stands out. There was an ancient directory that still referenced famous bar and a long ago demolished JCPenney, which I thought was a nice touch that totally emphasizes this point. It's also apparent that in recent months, probably in response to the closure announcement, that there's definitely some neglect going on here, particularly in less traveled sections of the mall, which you'll see as I keep taping here, as well as lots of items that are left behind by former tenants. In nearly all of the remaining tenants, and there's only a handful, well, you'll see, but they're mom and pop shops, which is quite typical of closing malls, or malls at the end of their life cycle, per se. But I also want to point out that Center Court, which used to house a carousel, has now been transformed into pickleball and tennis courts that were quite busy. Okay, so now that you got your brief overview of Chesterfield Mall, let me circle back to how I actually got into this place. I'll attempt to keep it as concise as possible and try not to ramble, although that might happen anyway because I can ramble. So I parked on the lower level parking lot between the former Dillard's and Macy's, and the mall doors from that lot were locked, as was the adjacent service entry door. So I realized I had no choice but to keep walking the exterior perimeter, trying every door until I found one that was unlocked. Well, the one I found that happened to be unlocked was at the loading dock between the former Macy's and Sears. And full disclosure, I've never entered any type of shopping premises through a service entry, so this was a new one for me. So I walked the service corridor until I found my way into the main concourse coming out of a double door. Unfortunately for myself, I'm also a stickler in that I have to leave the same way I came, so as awkward as it was going to be for me, I left through the same corridor and out that same door. But in my defense, that was technically closest to where I parked anyway. I'll attach my exit footage to the end of this video because I know a lot of y'all like that backroom stuff. Although I will say the footage is shaky because I am basically jogging out of there trying not to get caught. Okay, so you're probably wondering why those mall entry doors from the lower level lot were locked and I unconventionally entered Chesterfield. Well, once I was in the mall, I realized why those doors were locked. There's sheetrock partitions installed mid-wing that makes the side wings much shallower than they should be, with the doors being on the opposite side of those partitions. So as a result of this setup, the only door open is on the 2nd level by the theater, which is behind me now that we just passed. But had I come in a different street from the highway, I totally could have figured this out because there's cars in this upper level parking lot. The lower level lot where I parked was completely empty and deserted. Although I will say, simply putting signs on those doors was really all that was needed to direct people to come upstairs to get into the mall. From an architectural standpoint, I will say the mall is bright, especially in this section where the 3rd level emerges, and the ceiling treatments add a nice touch of elegance throughout. You've already noticed ample foliage, although I do find it to be a bit unkempt at this point. Oh, okay, so on the right here's one of those partitions that I was talking about. Dillard's would have been at the end of this wing. There's the other partition directly across, and that's where Sears would have anchored behind. And you can also see some of those courts below now that we're in center court area. So, as we're rounding this corner here, I'm realizing this is concluding the second floor lap tour of Chesterfield Mall here in Chesterfield, Missouri. So, I should probably be quiet now and leave you to enjoy the main level without my yapping. So, thanks again for sticking with me. Much more to come. Enjoy the rest of this video.